there's this institution in the UK called the Radio Times.
Like a TV guide for radio?
Yeah. On their website, they did some kind of popularity contest with different categories, like who's your favourite actor, who's your favourite TV star, who's your favourite radio presenter. And I don't think you win anything in particular. You're just like, I think they call it like their champion. It was brought to my attention. And this is where the story starts for me. And unbeknownst to you, also starts for you. Instead of just having radio stars, they seem to have radio and podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They created some audio section. It's not entirely clear what you're voting on or how one becomes the champion. It's like clickbait, isn't it? And they're taking advantage of people's popularity. These things happen.
Well, it says here that the radio and podcast champion is about who's got the velvet voice to claim the title.
Well,
but it's actually just a popularity contest.
And what they seem to have done is created this huge list of audio personalities, for lack of a better term. And you and I was in this list.
Well, I mean, I guess we're a UK podcast.
Yeah, but I don't know how the people at Radio Times knew about us and stuff. Like, I would have thought we were a little bit obscure for them. But anyway, we're there.
I do not think we would be a little bit obscure for them, but continue on.
Myself and this other chap called Greg James, who I've learned is like a very famous Radio 1 presenter in the UK, BBC Radio 1. Him and I were like near the top, and you were like third or fourth or something. But obviously there had not been many votes at this point. And when I drew people's attention to this, things changed rapidly. You absolutely skyrocketed. And it got to the point where so many Tims were involved and there was all this Reddit coordination going that I was even trying to manipulate the percentages. And I was sort of saying, let's try and get Gray onto exactly, 2/3 of the vote. You ended up with over 50% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
Big winner. And I nudged this Greg James guy for second place. And this vote is the worst structured voting system in the history of voting because you can just vote multiple times. You could just sit there and click. The whole thing's a debacle.
Yeah, I have voted immediately after.
It's a debacle. What they then did to keep this click farm running was the top 8 people then have this kind of head-to-head knockout contest. You were paired up with a woman called Jenny Murray, who's the presenter of the Woman's Hour on BBC Radio. And you won that vote. So you got to go through to the next stage. I was paired up with a radio presenter, Chris Evans.
Okay, that's a name I know.
Our American friends will know him because he presented Top Gear for a year just recently when the big Top Gear upheaval happened.
Okay,
he was the guy that
I
was
know
brought
his
in to
name.
try and save the show. Again, thanks to the Tims, I won the vote. Like I smashed Chris Evans. So this was very amusing to me.
I think this allows you to officially put on your CV, Brady Haran, more popular than Chris Evans.
Yeah. Anyway, we went through to the next round. I was paired up next time with my nemesis, Greg James again. And I was like joking around on Twitter, like saying, oh, look, it's my nemesis. But I didn't actually know that much about him, to be honest. So I went to his Wikipedia page just to learn more about him. And the Tims had already beaten me there. And in the part of the Wikipedia page where it was like you write about like personal information, it said his arch nemesis is Brady Haran, the YouTube video creator and podcaster. So he was officially my arch nemesis. That was me. And you were put up against this guy called Steve Allen, very popular London talk show host and has been around for years and years and has won awards and, good on him. So you were winning against him. And like the Tims were getting involved and I saw coordination on Reddit, which led to the coining of 2 new terms, both of which I quite like. One is Tim work, when Tims work together to make something happen.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And the other one was Tim foolery, when Tims get up to nonsense. Also a good one. And I believe scripts and algorithms were being written to try and ballot stuff and help us out.
I mean, hey, the website says vote early, vote often. Like, what do you want?
I went on to win my vote against my nemesis, and that was setting up the much anticipated and talked about final against you. And everyone was so curious about what would happen when you and I were placed head to head. And I already had all my jokes and gags and things I was going to do ready. It was going to be so much fun. But Steve Allen supporters, they got together on Facebook and elsewhere. And obviously you were oblivious to all this, so you weren't trying to manipulate the process in any way.
Well, no, and I knew this thing was happening because I'd seen it the day before get started, but it was one of these things I quickly realized the last thing in the world that I want is to win this poll, right? So that's why I was like, I'm going to shut the hell up on Twitter, right? Like that is my strategy. Like I decided to close my mouth about this.
Yeah. Well, whatever the reason was, Steve Allen came back and he won. So that was the end of you, I'm afraid.
Yes.
You were knocked out.
Yes, thank you, Steve Allen.
To win Group D, it was me versus Steve Allen. And like, I have to say, I didn't care about winning. I didn't want to win. I wanted you to win. I wasn't competitive about it. I wasn't too bothered. I'd had my fun. I had my moment with Chris Evans, who was the only person in the list who was really, really famous to me.
Yeah.
And I'd beaten him. So I felt like I'd had my fun and I'd had my moment, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
But then someone pointed out to me a tweet that he had written, and it kind of riled me up a little bit.
In this story, I am totally with you. It's like, oh, this has been like a funny thing. But then Steve Allen tweets, I'm through to the quarterfinals, so we need to vote again on the Radio Times website. It's another person I've never heard of. Please vote.
Another person I've never heard of.
Yeah, so this is referring to the both of us as like, it's somebody I've never heard of. Vote for me against this nobody. When I came across this, Steve Allen, well, guess what, Steve Allen? I don't know who the hell you are, right? But you are not treating Brady with the respect he deserves.
Indeed.
And I want to see you crushed. Like, I don't want to see Brady just win. I want to see you ground into the goddamn dust by a podcast with many, many hundreds of thousands of followers. Somebody you've never heard of. And what, like you can't bother to type it into Google for 2 seconds to look up who Dr. Brady Haran is? Like you can't figure this out? You can't even look at this guy on Twitter who has way more Twitter followers than you? Like there's something about it which, whether he intended or not, like just comes off as incredibly dismissive. And it's like, it's because he's against you. I feel really emotionally invested in your victory over Steve Allen. Like I really do. This guy I've never heard of, but like I would never go on the internet and be like, oh, Brady's got to beat some rando I've never heard of. Just go vote, right? And like in a very assumptive way, like something about it just drives me crazy. And so like, whatever you're going to say, I feel like I feel it 10 times more than you do.
Oh, that's nice.
What is life if we don't get ridiculously upset over things that don't matter, right? No fun at all. That's what it is.
I just went and looked at Steve Allen's Twitter, and an hour ago, he's just tweeted, vote, vote, vote. I'm going to retweet that and say, I shared this sentiment.
Where
but
is
unlike him, I'm going to include the link to the place where you vote.
Well, yeah, because you know how the internet works. Yeah, of course. I'm going to say, couldn't agree more. Dr. Brady Haran for the win. Exclamation mark.
Oh, no. Did you put the link? So last time people listened, if they listened to the last episode, they'll know the Radio Times ran this poll for their radio and podcast champion. They ran all different polls for different categories like TV stars and comedians, and there was a radio and podcast section. It got to a point where I was in this quarterfinal up against this guy called Steve Allen, who Gray and I thought was a bit dismissive of us in a tweet. So we sort of caused a call to arms to try and win the vote. Let me win the vote against this guy. I won this vote against Steve Allen, and I had said on the podcast, that was it. This is a meaningless, silly vote to just drive clicks to their website and increase their advertising. And I said, I'm not going to have anything more to do with it. So in the semi-final, I was paired up with someone called Lila Parsons, who is a DJ and a TV presenter and a model. She's obviously very talented and successful. But it turns out I won that vote as well. I didn't even follow that vote, really. And the final was against, funnily enough, a colleague, a radio colleague of Steve Allen, like a co-presenter on the same station, like mates. And I just want to say from the outset, I quite like this guy. Like I listened to his show a couple of times. He seems reasonably like-minded to me on some issues. A lot of people who follow Hello Internet like him. I found out there was a lot of crossover. Seems a sound guy. And also before the vote started, he even tweeted me and like said, you know, good luck, mate. Ha ha. And I sort of tweeted back. So the vote started and the Tims took over and they got really, really into it. And I want to say, Radio Times was really whipping this up into a frenzy. Their article on their website said in the blue corner and in the red corner, and they all the way through the whole thing, they were tweeting about it all the time. They were inciting people to vote. They were using language that like made it sound like a real war. They were using language like rally the troops.
Oh, yeah.
They specifically said on their website and in multiple places, vote as many times as you want, vote often, because I think they wanted people to continually refresh the pages and up their ad impressions.
Exactly. Yeah. That's 100% what it was. I realized they were retweeting everything that they possibly could that was related to these internet fights.
The teams got really into it. They created this like battle command station on Reddit, on a Reddit thread, where they coordinated in ways that I still don't understand. They were clearly using automated voting and bots and things like that. They were creating pages where the voting could be done automatically by your computer. And clearly a kind of arms war started, because James O'Brien fans, who I want to point out were doing the same thing, and I have lots of evidence they were doing the same thing, and the vote wouldn't have been as close as it was if they weren't doing the same thing. But some of the more old-fashioned James O'Brien fans started crying foul. Mm-hmm. And because the Tims were doing this so openly, they were doing it on Reddit, they were explaining their tactics so that other people could do it. It was a real public communal effort. It wasn't clandestine.
Yeah.
That's why the James O'Brien fans were stealing all the technology and codes that they were finding and using it to vote for their guy. So it was very open.
Automated voting started escalating at a rate that almost felt like there's a self-learning artificial intelligence here that is pulling apart everything. It was very interesting to see in the Reddit threads. Slightly terrifying to see what the audience can do if it coordinates. Yeah. Right? It's like, Jesus Christ! Like these guys might be rigging real elections, right?
It was amazing.
Much like a shredder in which you keep shoving in more paper until it breaks. This felt like the same thing. Like Radio Times, you want votes? You're going to get votes. You're going to get millions and millions of votes. You're going to get more votes than there ever will be people in the universe. Like, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if in the end, the results on that final vote were in the billions, right? Like on either side.
They made the percentages public, but they didn't make the number of votes public.
Someone at the Radio Times was looking at the numbers, looking at the monster that they themselves hath summoned from the internet, and they wanted to turn it off, right? They wanted to stop it. And so they introduced the CAPTCHA. The CAPTCHAs are those words you have to type in to prove that you are not a robot. This to me was when it's like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. Now this has gotten out of control because you Radio Times probably have like actual people on the radio being quite annoyed with you and your position as you're trying to be like this thing that radio people might care about. Yeah. So like they suddenly found themselves in an awkward position.
Yeah, because the radio people didn't seem to take it as quite the joke we did.
No.
And I think obviously, core business for Radio Times is probably radio. These people probably buy ads in their magazine. Yeah. They pay to have their listings on there. So the people they were pissing off were like the people who actually put bread on the table.
And so after a couple of hours, they pulled the CAPTCHA. And that was when it was like, my blood is now boiling. It's like, oh, okay, you're just being really open about this banana republic that you're running over here. Like, why don't you just make up the results at this point? So it made me furious to see this election where they wanted to change the rules to get the result they want. And when it wasn't working and it was actually worse for them, they're like, whoop, I guess we'll go back to the other way and like change it back.
They went deadly silent on the whole thing. They never said or tweeted another word. They still haven't to this day. Even though they're happily tweeting about other winners, they went completely silent. I thought the best thing for me would be to win, but to win narrowly so that everyone saved face. But that's not what happened.
No.
And I ended up winning about 80%.
There's a present that we got for you that we wanted to have you open.
It's very secure. It doesn't contain bees, does it?
Yeah, surprise, it's a box full of live bees.
This is a new microphone.
What does the base say, Brady?
The base says, Dr. Brady Harron, Radio and Podcast Champion 2017. You're being naughty.
Brady, you won that. You won that by an enormous amount. What was there from the Radio Times? Naught but silence. And my wife and I thought, That's not the kind of respect and acknowledgement that Dr. Brady Haran deserves. We need to give him a trophy. The trophy is a manifestation of like the thing that the Hello Internet audience did.
That's my question, is what did this vote measure? Because it hasn't voted who's a better radio presenter or podcaster or champion of anything in terms of us as individuals like me or James O'Brien or Steve Allen or anyone. What do you think this vote has established? What has been won?
I think what has been won is a kind of audience intensity. People who didn't have technical skills were asking like, oh, what can I do to help? Someone was essentially running the CAPTCHA through like a mechanical Turk system so that people could decode what the words were and then have a bot do the other parts of doing the voting automatically. And it's like they just got that system set up like right before the CAPTCHA got shut down. That was the equivalent of internet users saying like, and you have my axe. That's why this trophy exists. Radio Times, you thought you were doing something far more interesting happened around this. That's what this trophy is about there, Brady. It was just a very, very fun and interesting weekend and terrifyingly impressive to see what an internet community can do.
So I guess the next big question is, when they do it again next year, and I think they will because it seems to be something they're quite proud of, will you and I be put in it again? I mean, I'm the defending champion.
You know, Brady, you are the defending champion. It would be outrageous if you were not included next year.